Imagine a world where the very foundation of our clean energy future is quietly running out. It sounds like a dystopian novel, a whisper of crises. But this is the unsettling reality unfolding in the global silver market right now. A phenomenon so profound that the largest government mints and bullion suppliers are openly admitting they cannot refill their shelves. They are rationing, they are sold out, and they are struggling to fabricate the coins and bars that investors and manufacturers rely on. And this isn't just about a few empty coin trays in a dealer's shop. This is a structural, systemic, vanishing act that is shaking the very core of global finance and industrial supply chains. For centuries, silver has played a dual role. It is the poor man's gold, a timeless monetary metal, and simultaneously, it is the unmatched industrial servant, the king of electrical conductivity, a necessary ingredient in almost every piece of advanced technology we use. But suddenly, these two roles are colliding head-on, creating a perfect storm that is causing the physical supply of silver to evaporate right before our eyes. We are witnessing a monumental mismatch between an inelastic supply and a truly ferocious, almost insatiable, demand, driven by forces far more powerful than simple speculative trading. Think about the scale of this problem. The entire world's mine production of silver in a year barely covers the industrial and investment needs. And for 5 consecutive years now, the world has consumed more physical silver than has been mined or recycled, draining the above-ground stockpiles. Those critical reserves held in the vaults of London and New York, down to historic lows. What happens when the metal that powers our solar revolution, that enables our electric vehicles, that makes 5G and AI data centers possible, simply isn't available anymore? This is the story of the Great Silver Vanishing Act. The structural deficit that is turning a commonplace metal into a critical, strategic resource, and how this slow-motion crisis is governments and mints scrambling to find ounces that simply aren't there. And by the time you finish hearing this, you'll understand why silver is arguably the most strategically important metal of the next decade, and why this scarcity is poised to create a shockwave across everything from your personal portfolio to the price of your next solar panel. The story truly begins by understanding the silent, yet monstrous, demand side of this equation. Specifically, the industrial appetite that has surged from a manageable flow to an absolute torrent, entirely reshaping silver's market identity from a precious metal hedge to a critical industrial commodity. For decades, the photographic industry was the largest consumer. But that era ended with the rise of digital technology, leading many to dismiss silver as a legacy asset, but they missed the pivot. Today, the single largest driver of industrial silver demand is the green energy revolution, primarily for the solar cells that convert sunlight into electricity. And silver is the irreplaceable conductive paste in almost every solar panel in the world. As nations worldwide mandate massive shifts toward renewable energy to meet climate targets, the scale of solar deployment is truly staggering, not millions, but billions of new panels required every single year. And while manufacturers are getting better at thrifting or reducing the silver content per panel, the sheer volume of new installations is growing faster than any efficiency gain, keeping solar demand alone near 200 million ounces annually, a figure that is crushing the supply side. But it's not just solar. The entire electrification of our economy is a silver sinkhole. Electric vehicles, or EVs, use significantly more silver than their internal combustion counterparts because every electrical action, from the power windows and seat adjustments to the critical battery management systems and advanced sensor arrays, requires silver-coated contacts and conductive components due to the metal's unsurpassed conductivity. And as the global auto fleet rapidly shifts electric, the demand from this sector alone is surging past 90 million ounces per year. This industrial hunger is non-negotiable. For these applications, there is simply no perfect substitute that offers silver's unique combination of conductivity, thermal resistance, and chemical stability, making it a strategic resource essential for 5G infrastructure, high-end electronics, advanced medical devices, and even the explosive growth of massive AI data centers, which are complex silver sponges. When you put all these industrial forces together, they represent over 700 million ounces of demand annually, an immutable consumption base that, unlike speculative investment, will not simply disappear when the price rises. And this industrial floor is the single most important difference between the silver market of the past and the acute physical shortages we see today. This colossal surge in industrial demand, however, only tells half the story. The other half is a rigid, almost broken supply chain that simply cannot respond, no matter how high the price goes. This is the structural flaw in silver's market. Approximately 70 to 80% of all silver mined is not extracted from primary silver mines, but rather as a byproduct of mining other metals, primarily copper, zinc, and lead. Think of it like a free bonus in the mining operation. The major miners are focused on the base metal, and the silver is just a happy accident that is separated and refined later. The consequence of this is profound. Higher silver prices alone do not incentivize a massive increase in silver production. If the price of copper or zinc is down, making those mines economically unviable, the silver output from those operations also drops, completely independent of silver's own price. And since the economics of these base metals have been volatile, and new large-scale discoveries for them are slow, the silver supply remains structurally. The handful of primary silver mines that do exist face their own challenges, including declining ore grades, which means miners have to dig up and process far more rock to get the same amount of silver they did 10 or 20 years ago, driving up costs and requiring huge capital expenditure for new projects. Moreover, mining is a decade-long process, from exploration to full production. And because silver prices languished for so long, investment in new silver-focused projects simply dried up. Now, even with prices breaking historic highs, it takes years to permit, finance, and build a major new mine, meaning the supply response to the current high prices is effectively capped for the next half-decade. On the recycling front, which accounts for the remainder of the supply, the story is equally constrained. While the recycling of industrial scrap is growing, it is technically challenging and expensive to recover tiny amounts of silver from complex modern electronics like smartphones and circuit boards, many of which end up in landfills, meaning we are effectively consuming and scattering this strategic metal in a way that makes it practically irrecoverable. The result of this inelastic supply and stagnant mine output is a chronic structural deficit that has been compounding year after year, systematically draining the world as accessible stockpiles and creating a supply crunch that no amount of market rhetoric can simply wish away. The inevitable consequence of this chronic structural deficit is the literal emptying of the world's most trusted vaults and the systemic failure of major financial institutions to meet physical demand, which is where the panic truly sets in for governments and mints. We are talking about the inventories held in the vaults of the London Bullion Market Association, the LBMA, and the COMEX in New York, which are the two central hubs for institutional wholesale. So these are the pools of metal that mints and large industrial users tap into for their immediate needs, and their registered stockpiles have been hemorrhaging metal for years, dropping to multi-decade lows. When these vaults get critically low, the market flips into what is known as backwardation, where the immediate spot price for silver is higher than the price of a future contract, which is a rare and powerful signal that people are willing to pay a premium right now just to get their hands on the metal, because they fear it won't be there later. But the most visible sign of the crisis comes directly from the official institutions themselves. National mints, which produce the iconic silver eagles, maples, and Britannias that investors stack, have repeatedly announced periods of complete sellout, often suspending the sale of their most popular bullion products or imposing severe rationing to their authorized distributors. The Royal Canadian Mint, the U.S. Mint, and even major private refiners have all faced unprecedented backlogs and shortages of the blanks, the raw silver forms needed to strike coins. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a logistics nightmare, born from scarcity. The industrial users, who need silver in specific forms like grain or paste, are now competing directly with investment demand for the same finite physical ounces. And when this happens, the price you see on the screen, the so-called spot price, becomes a fiction, because the actual price you must pay to take physical delivery, the premium, skyrockets. This breakdown in inventory is the physical manifestation of the structural deficit, forcing a change in behavior from the very top of the financial supply chain. As central banks and governments realize they are losing control over a strategically vital resource, this environment of acute physical scarcity has naturally collided with a massive resurgence in investor demand, creating an unprecedented global scramble for physical metal that has pushed the market to its breaking point. For years, silver was ignored while gold took the spotlight as the ultimate monetary hedge. But the macroeconomic landscape has changed dramatically, with global debt levels reaching staggering, unmanageable heights. Persistent and stubborn inflation eroding the purchasing power of fiat currencies, and geopolitical tensions driving a deep-seated uncertainty. Investors are flocking back to hard assets. Silver, often dubbed leveraged gold due to its smaller market size, offers a more volatile and potentially explosive store of value. Unlike gold, which is mostly held as a store of value by central banks, a far greater portion of the silver that has been mined throughout history has been used up and dissipated in industrial applications, meaning the above-ground investment-grade supply is far smaller and more prone to being cornered. This combination of factors has led to an explosion in retail and institutional buying of silver coins and bars, especially in Asia, where silver has a deep cultural and monetary significance, particularly in nations like India, which is witnessing a cultural and regulatory-driven tidal wave of demand as silver becomes an increasingly accepted financial asset. When you have this new flood of investment demand, millions of retail buyers and institutional funds seeking physical protection piling into a market that is already structurally incapable of meeting its basic industrial needs, the system simply locks up. Premiums, the cost above the spot price, don't just increase by a few percent, they explode by 10%, 20%, or even more, signaling a desperate race for immediate delivery. This is the final layer of the perfect storm, a scarcity driven by green technology, compounded by a fixed mine supply, and now amplified by a global flight to safety, creating a scenario where the available physical silver is being monetized and hoarded at a pace that cannot be sustained by the current supply dynamics. The long-term implications of this vanishing silver supply are not just about market volatility or the price of a bullion coin. They fundamentally challenge the feasibility and timeline of the world's most ambitious clean energy and technological goals. If silver, the very backbone of the solar and EV revolutions, becomes prohibitively expensive, or worse, physically unavailable, it will act as a massive brake on the transition away from fossil fuels. Imagine governments struggling to meet their net zero targets not because the technology doesn't exist, but because the raw, irreplaceable material is missing from the supply chain, and companies are forced to slow down production of solar panels and electric vehicle components, driving up the cost of green technology, and potentially making the energy transition politically and economically untenable for many developing nations. Furthermore, the strategic importance of silver is only growing. Major governments are increasingly recognizing it as a critical mineral, necessary for national defense and key infrastructure, placing it in the same category as materials like lithium and rare earths. This official designation acknowledges that silver's utility extends far beyond simple monetary value and into the realm of national security, especially with its uses in advanced military electronics, missile guidance systems, and emerging AI technologies. The silver market is essentially undergoing a massive, violent repricing event, one driven by real-world physical scarcity rather than purely financial speculation. And this repricing is necessary to eventually bring enough latent supply out of hidden, perhaps old silverware, industrial scrap, or currently marginal mining deposits to balance the equation. However, until that higher price is sustained and the market finds a true equilibrium, the world will continue to consume its physical silver stocks at an unsustainable rate, leaving governments, mints, and manufacturers in a state of chronic, profound anxiety over where the next few million ounces will come from. This vanishing act is not just a market event. It is a profound systemic shift where humble metal has become the choke point for the global technological future. So, where does this leave us? Staring into the face of a silver supply crunch that has drained vaults and left government mints unable to meet basic demand. It leaves us with the stark realization that we are no longer talking about a precious metal in the traditional sense. We are dealing with a critical industrial resource that also happens to be a powerful monetary asset, and its unique dual identity is creating an inevitable squeeze. This is not a temporary backlog. It is a long-term, structural imbalance, where the exponential growth of green and high-tech demand is crashing into an byproduct-dependent supply chain that simply cannot scale up overnight. The empty coin shelves and the dwindling institutional vaults are the physical evidence of this global consumption imbalance, a warning signal that the metal essential for the future of electrification is being consumed faster than it can be pulled from the earth. And the consequences of this will ripple through every corner of the global economy, from the cost of your electricity to the stability of your portfolio. The lesson here is a simple but powerful one. In a world racing toward technological advancement and energy transition, the foundational materials that enable that future are about to become the most valuable commodities of all. And silver, the vanishing metal, stands at the very top of that list, forcing every one of us to reconsider its value and its absolute necessity.